Yesterday night, I had a big fight with my mum, and I decided to make this video because it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. So, today I wanted to talk a little bit about my life as the oldest sibling, my parents' marriage counselor, and the mum friend. So, because both of my parents are immigrants who came to Australia with very little, I always felt I had to be very grateful for the life they had built for me. And I think that sense of obligation to be grateful for what I had was one of the reasons I became dismissive of some of the problematic parenting that they were doing. And it took many years and for me to go to therapy to actually realize how some of the things I experienced growing up were actually not okay. Before I go any further, I just want to clarify that by no means was I a model child growing up. In fact, I had a lot of problems, but I think I'll talk about that in like a different video later on. However, in this video, I really just want to focus on some of the things I experienced and how they affected me personally. When I was in early primary school, my parents owned a restaurant. So they were working very long hours, 7 days a week, and I was looked after by my grandparents. And because I didn't see them a lot of the time, it was kind of hard to develop a close bond with them. And then later on, unfortunately, that restaurant burned down in a fire and they couldn't do that anymore. So my dad started taxi driving. So he was working really long hours. My mom was under a lot of stress looking after both of my siblings. And my sister came along a little bit later and she was unplanned. So my parents were debating whether to keep her or not. And my mom actually asked me, like, do you want another younger sister? And at the time I was really excited. I was like, yes, we should have another one. And I will help out. I will change her nappies and help give her baths. That very quickly changed once I found her to be very annoying and taking away a lot of my mom's attention. But definitely now that we're all older, I am very grateful that we made that decision and that she's a part of our family now because she's an amazing person. But yeah, my mom was under just a lot of pressure having to look after 3 kids by herself. And my dad was taxi driving very early from 3 a.m. until the evening sometimes. So they both had a lot on their plate. And then after my dad stopped taxi driving, they started a convenience store business. So it was a very small shop. And again, they were working very long hours from I think the store opened around like 6, 7 a.m. and they would work until 9 p.m. at night. So actually from a very young age, I was given a lot of responsibilities and I had to do chores and stuff like that whenever they were working, as well as look after my siblings. Now, I was a kid, so mind you, I wasn't happy to be doing that, but I had to do that. All I really wanted was to play, but I had no choice to do these things. So you could say that as a child, I definitely had a lot of resentment for the situation I was in. Unfortunately, I wasn't much of a high achiever whatsoever. I did get a bit more studious towards the end of high school, but for the most part, I wasn't the best student. Like I did okay. I had like pretty good grades, but I wasn't like up there by traditional Asian standards. And so I always felt like I had to prove myself by some other means. And for me, that was just fulfilling this role of like the good girl, the good daughter. So I was always relatively obedient. I felt that I had to prove that I was trustworthy and responsible because I wasn't as smart as the other kids. From a very young age, as I said, this idea of responsibility and being the kind of mature, obedient child was sort of instilled into me. Now, there's one particular instant which is very vivid in my mind, and I revisit it a lot as the kind of moment which kind of changed a lot of things for me. So my parents always fought a lot when I was young, and pretty much every memory I think of when I think to my childhood is pretty much a lot of fighting. And the thing is, when my parents fought, it was a lot of verbal abuse, just yelling, screaming, saying anything they could to do the most damage on each other. But it never really got physical. So the reason this one memory sticks out the most is that it's the first time in my life I felt genuinely scared. And I just remember my parents were arguing and it was getting really loud. And for the first time, my dad picked up a bowl off the dinner table and he smashed it against the wall. And my siblings were quite young at the time. I think they were early primary school. I can't remember exactly. And that was the first time I had seen any kind of physical violence, I guess you could say, happen in my home. And they were threatening each other, saying they would call the police, that they wanted a divorce and all these things. And I was crying because I was so scared. And I took both of my siblings into one of the bedrooms. And I remember thinking to myself while I was holding them and comforting them and telling them that it was going to be okay. It was in that moment where I really came to realize that I would have to protect them. It actually makes me very sad because I love my siblings a lot, and sometimes I feel like they misunderstand me. And actually my brother said this to me once, how he felt that I was always trying to suck up to my parents, and I didn't really care about either of them. But that's so far from the truth. I care about my siblings a lot, but I wasn't very good at expressing it when I was younger. And even now, it's still hard for me to convey the way I feel. But I really did try my best to be there for them, in any way I could. And so even now that they're older, I still want to protect them. And the thing I'm scared of most is for them to go through the same things I did and for that cycle to be repeated. Because the situation at home was never good and there was so much tension, I grew up with a lot of anger and resentment. I was angry that my parents fought a lot. I was angry that I had so many chores to do. I was angry that I couldn't have fun. I don't know if you've ever had this feeling where you come home and you don't feel safe. Like, my parents fought so much that the moment I stepped into the house after I came home from school or from work, I could tell whether or not my parents were in a bad mood, whether anything had happened. And it was like I was always walking on eggshells or like preparing for the worst possible scenario. There were a lot of reasons why their marriage was broken. And I used to think it was always my mother's fault because she was always the louder one. She was always the one who would get irritated really easily. But it took me a while to see that it was a two-way problem and my dad had a part to play in it as well. After I turned 20 years old and developed a little bit more emotional maturity, I tried to seek out resources to learn how to communicate more effectively, because after witnessed my parents miscommunicate for such a long period of time, I didn't want to be like them. And I kind of learned to deal with conflict a lot better. And so suddenly I started finding myself in the position of a mediator or like a fixer. I was always sandwiched between them when my parents fought, trying to remain neutral and objective and make sure the argument didn't blow up. Over time, I found myself constantly being the go-to person whenever they had problems. My mum would say, "Oh, go talk to your dad about this because I feel this. I became the outlet for her to emotionally unload because she was finally comfortable enough and trusted me enough to share that with me. But she didn't really think about the emotional impact that would have on me, I guess. And I mean, it's hard because I wanted to be there for her, but I didn't know what to do with all this information. And I felt an obligation that I was the one who had to fix their marriage, which was just not going to happen. And after I began going to therapy, my therapist actually said to me, "You're not responsible for your parents' marriage. You're not responsible for their happiness." And as a child, when your mum said to you, so one time my mum accused me of never picking a side. And my therapist was appalled because she said, as a child, you're not responsible for that because they're both adults and that's a problem between them. And it took me a long time to figure out that I had to have boundaries. For the first time, talking to my therapist and having someone else validate my feelings and saying, "Oh, you have every right to feel how you feel." It was like a massive weight had been lifted off my chest. I always thought that if I moved out of home, it would get a lot better. And I mean, it did, it got a lot better. But it's funny how even with that physical distance between us, there was still, it was like I couldn't break free from the shackles of my responsibility. So anytime something happened at home or something happened with my mom, if she was upset, my dad would message me. And just yesterday in the morning, he messaged me and he said, "Mom's crying." And, you know, that message in itself is not weird because obviously he wants me to go comfort her and he knows that I'm good at supporting her. But if you know my dad and you know our family and you know their relationship, you know that that text message actually reads, "Your mom's crying, she's sad, I don't know what to do. Can you come and take care of it so I don't have to deal with it because I don't have the emotional capacity to do that." Lately, it's been really hard because my mom has been undergoing treatment for her breast cancer and that's affected her hormones a lot. And I think her emotions are quite affected because she's been a lot more irritable and moody. And it's been a very difficult time because I want to be there to support her. But every time I go see her, I feel so anxious because I'm scared I'm going to become her verbal punching bag. And even though I know it's not her fault that she's feeling the way she is, it just affects me so much. And sometimes it's hard for me to pull back and make space for myself so that I can be in a better place to support her. The funny thing is that all the habits and behavior I had learned at home dealing with my parents' marriage problems and then the responsibilities I had as the oldest sibling, that really translated into other facets of my life. And one in particular is my friendships. I became the caretaker, I became the mom friend, the advice giver. And I don't know, it's almost like it become embedded into my personality to have to take care of other people. It often makes me wonder, I'm giving away so much of myself to make other people feel better. What do I have left for me? And so I remember in uni days, I had a lot of anxiety, especially social anxiety. But the friends group I had, we were all basically depressed and anxious, honestly. My best friend had a lot of social anxiety as well. And I remember having this feeling where I was like, oh, I have to get over my own social anxiety because I don't want her to have to be in a situation where she would have to be uncomfortable, right? So always I would put aside how I felt so that other people could feel better. And over time, it's become a big problem because I feel my emotional capacity really depleted. And then so often I'm feeling depressed and I feel so alone. And I kind of recognize now it's because I haven't looked after myself. Like maybe if I spent less time trying to fix everyone else's problems, I'd be able to address some of my own. I can definitely say I'm getting better now at learning to create boundaries for myself. But it's definitely still a work in progress. A lot of these habits have been built over such a long period of time, and learning to undo them is actually really hard. And that combined with the fact that often you want to be there for your loved ones, it's really hard to say no. But I think it's important to practice saying no sometimes because you have to make room for yourself. Because if you spend all of your energy giving bits of yourself away to other people until there's nothing left of yourself for you, then you are going to be really exhausted. So focus on loving yourself first and focus on taking care of yourself first so that you build up emotional capacity. And then that way, when you go to help others, you actually have resources to give, as opposed to carving yourself hollow in order to try fix them and try help them. My experience that I talked about in this video is unique to me, but I'm sure there are people out there who can relate to it. But there's also probably other people who were also the oldest child who probably don't relate to this experience at all. So it's really quite different for everybody. And I would love to hear other experiences you guys have had, regardless of if you're the oldest child, middle child, or the youngest child. Maybe in the future I'll get my sister to come talk about her experience as being the youngest sibling. But yeah, for now, if you liked my video and you like the content, please do click the subscribe button, because I know a lot of people are watching this are not subscribed to me, and give me a like. And I'll see you next time when I release my next video, which is always on a Thursday. Thank you. Bye.